Very good morning to you. Unpack this story for us, please.
Good morning. It's a bit rainy here in Dar es Salaam, and it's the 18th edition of the Africa Nordic meeting taking place for the very first time here in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. A meeting that seeks to bring together African countries, particularly foreign ministers of these African countries and Nordic countries, to talk about sustainable development. The theme for the year is partnering for sustainable development, and so essentially African countries are coming together with Nordic countries to see how they can achieve the 2030 agenda of sustainable goals.
Oh. Well, thank you so much. Isaac is actually in Dar es Salaam. Isaac, what do we expect Minister Pandor to say?
At the moment, the foreign ministers are in a closed session. After the initial session that was open to the press, there we had initial remarks from the foreign minister, the Tanzanian foreign minister, Professor Kabudi, welcoming all the delegates, about 250 delegates from African countries and the Nordic countries in attendance here today. And also giving remarks, opening remarks, was the foreign minister of Norway, also welcoming delegates to the session and pledging that, amongst other things, include in ensuring that African countries get a seat in the Security Council of the United Nations. And also speaking today was the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, President Magufuli, officially opening the session. And so it is expected after the opening of the session that the foreign ministers will be in a closed session, and thereafter they will give a statement on their deliberations. But just to brief you, yesterday they did have a session, a dialogue on some of the topical issues. They are focusing on peace and security, they're focusing on investment and trade, those being the key areas. And essentially the message is that no country can develop on their own, and therefore partnership is very important between African countries and Nordic countries. Today we heard the President of Tanzania talking about how African countries can learn from Nordic countries in terms of how they've developed a population of 27 million for Nordic countries, but 1.2 billion people on the African continent. But the level of development in the Nordic countries does not compare to what we have in Africa. So President Magufuli challenging African countries to learn from Nordic countries. And so this is the essence of the conversations that are going to be had today in closed session. Although we do know from initial comments and remarks from the Foreign Minister of Tanzania that there has been a pledge by some of the Nordic countries to help fund African countries to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is what we know so far.
So, Isaac, we have seen different countries hold massive conferences in relation to their interactions with Africa, like you see Japan and China, recently Russia inviting over African countries to come and have conversations with them about how the one country can interact with the different African countries. Now, in terms of the Nordic countries, why have they decided to come together as a grouping in their interaction with Africa?
These meetings started in 2001. This is the 18th year in a row that they've been having these meetings, and essentially it is based on the premise of equals coming together to share knowledge and discuss about pertinent issues, so in terms of foreign policy and global issues. So it is an open and informal dialogue to help these countries move forward. Nordic countries have had a long history of cooperation with African countries. Today, President Magufuli noted that even the Solomon Mahlangu College in Morogoro here in Tanzania that housed a lot of South African freedom fighters in the 1970s was funded by a country like Norway. So Nordic countries have had an interest in seeing Africa move forward in terms of freedom, but now economically progress. And so there's a coming together on the belief that they can share knowledge and share experience, and to see that African countries move forward in terms of building industries and growing their economies, but also that Nordic countries also benefit, and as such that there be mutual benefits between African countries and Nordic countries.
Any specific deals of interest that we are expecting to see come out of this particular event?
What we do know is what we've been told by the Foreign Minister of Tanzania, Professor Kabudi. Speaking earlier today in his introductory remarks, he mentioned that the preliminary dialogue that they had yesterday with the foreign ministers pointed to an agreement on pushing forward with measures to tackle climate change, seeing it as an impediment to reaching the sustainable development goals. So that is something that is definitely on the cards, that is being discussed right now behind closed doors, but also matters of peace and security, noting that it is an important aspect of reaching development goals. And as such, today we heard from the Norwegian foreign minister that they will push to see an African country or African countries take their seat in the permanent seats in this United Nations Security Council.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. We'll continue to follow up on that story. Our colleague Isaac Lukando coming to us from Dar es Salaam for the Africa Nordic country meeting. The Nordic countries, you will know, include the Faroe Islands, Greenland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland and Finland.